Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In today's video, we are taking a very detailed look at the coins. Coin number 1. This 1956 with D Lincoln wheat penny, specifically a coin described as being in very fine condition with a claimed current market value of $153.00. Before we begin, it is important to understand that coin values can vary dramatically depending on grade, color designation, varieties, errors, certification, eye appeal, and actual market demand. Published price guides for ordinary 1956 with D cents can show substantially lower values in very fine condition, while exceptional varieties or high-grade certified examples can command much more. So if you have one of these pennies, do not automatically assume that every 1956 with D penny is worth 153th. Instead, use the information in this video to understand exactly what makes a particular example more desirable and what you should look for before buying or selling. The 1956 with D Lincoln wheat penny is one of the final issues of the famous Lincoln wheat cent series, which ran from 1909 through 1958. The coin was designed by Victor David Brenner, whose portrait of President Abraham Lincoln became one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. On the front, or obverse, Lincoln faces toward the right, with the inscription "Liberty" beside his portrait and the familiar motto "In God We Trust" above him. The date 1956 appears in front of Lincoln, while the small D mint mark appears beneath the date area, identifying the Denver Mint as the facility where this particular coin was produced. On the reverse, you find the famous two wheat ears surrounding the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America, along with E pluribus unum above. This wheat reverse is exactly what gives the series its popular nickname, the wheat penny. The 1956 with D issue is particularly interesting because the Denver Mint produced an enormous number of these coins. According to major numismatic references, approximately 1,098,200,100 examples were struck at Denver. The coin is made from a bronze composition containing approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, weighs about 3.11 grams, measures approximately 19 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. That huge production figure tells us something very important. The date and mint mark by themselves do not make every 1956 with D penny rare. In fact, ordinary examples are relatively common. The real question is whether your particular coin has characteristics that separate it from the millions of normal examples that survive today. Now let us talk about the D mint mark, because this is one of the first things collectors should check. The letter D indicates that the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. When examining your coin, look beneath the date on the obverse. You should see a small capital letter D. If the D is present, you have the Denver issue. If there is no mint mark, you have a Philadelphia issue, while other mint marks identify coins struck at different facilities. Mint marks are extremely important in Lincoln wheat penny collecting because the same year can have different values depending on where the coin was produced. However, with the 1956 D, the D mint mark does not automatically make the coin rare because Denver produced more than 1 billion examples. The next major factor is condition, and this is where our focus turns to the very fine grade. When collectors describe a Lincoln wheat penny as very fine, they are generally talking about a coin that has experienced noticeable circulation but still retains substantial detail. A very fine coin should show a strong overall design, with Lincoln's portrait remaining clearly visible and the major features still well defined. Some of the finer details in Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and coat may show wear, but they should not be completely flattened. The lettering should remain readable soon, and the date should be clear. On the reverse, the wheat ears and central lettering should retain considerable detail, even though the highest points will show evidence of circulation. For a 1956 with D wheat penny in very fine condition, collectors should pay special attention to the amount of wear. A coin that has been heavily circulated may have lost much of the original detail and could fall into a lower grade. A coin that retains unusually sharp details and minimal wear may potentially qualify for a higher grade. This distinction is extremely important because even small differences in condition can affect collector demand. Professional grading services use standardized grading scales, and a coin that appears very fine to an untrained eye may receive a different grade after professional examination. One of the most important lessons for anyone searching for valuable wheat pennies is this: condition should never be judged only by color or shine. Many people see a bright copper penny and immediately assume that it must be valuable. That is not necessarily true. A coin can be bright because it has been cleaned, polished, chemically treated, or otherwise altered, and such treatment can actually reduce its desirability to serious collectors. Original surfaces are extremely important. A naturally preserved coin with attractive original color can be much more desirable than a cleaned coin that looks artificially shiny. With recognized variety references, the date 1956 itself also carries historical significance. The coin was produced during the final years of the wheat cent series. By this period, the Lincoln wheat design had already been in circulation for nearly half a century. Millions of Americans had used these pennies in everyday commerce. A 1956 with D cent could have traveled through grocery stores, gas stations, banks, vending machines, and countless other places before eventually ending up in a collection. Every surviving circulated coin carries a small piece of that history. Next, coin number 2. This 1958 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, described here as being in green condition with a claimed market value of $149, zeroth. However, there is an important point every collector should understand before assuming that any 1958 penny is worth $149. Published market references generally place ordinary circulated 1958 Philadelphia cents much lower, while exceptional condition coins, recognized varieties, and major errors can be worth considerably more. For example, USA Coinbook currently lists typical 1958 Philadelphia examples at modest values, while PCGS documents a rare 1958 double die, obverse variety, and high-grade examples that can bring dramatically higher prices. The first thing we need to understand is exactly what without mint mark means. On a 1958 Lincoln wheat penny, a missing mint mark does not necessarily mean the coin is rare or defective. In this case, no mint mark identifies the Philadelphia Mint. Philadelphia did not place a mint letter on these cents, so an authentic 1958 penny with no mint mark is normally the Philadelphia issue. The 1958 Lincoln wheat cent is historically special because it was the final regular year of the original Lincoln wheat reverse. The design had been introduced in 1909 and continued for almost half a century. In 1959, the wheat reverse was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. PCGS describes the 1958 and 1958 with D cents as the final regular issue year of Victor David Brenner's Lincoln wheat design. This gives the 1958 penny a special place in American coin collecting. Imagine the historical moment when this coin entered circulation. America was in the late 1950s, a period of major technological, economic, and cultural change. The Lincoln wheat penny had already been used by generations of Americans. People paid for groceries, newspapers, transportation, and countless everyday items with these small copper cents. A 1958 penny could have passed through many hands before eventually being saved by a collector. Now we need to address the phrase green condition. Green is not one of the standard Sheldon numerical grades used by professional grading companies. For copper Lincoln cents, collectors more commonly encounter color designations such as brown, and red on uncirculated coins. Therefore, if someone describes a 1958 penny as being in green condition, it is important to determine exactly what they mean. If you think your 1958 penny might have doubling, do not immediately assume that you have discovered the famous variety. Genuine doubled dies have specific characteristics, and not every blurry or doubled-looking letter represents a doubled die. Machine doubling, die deterioration, damage, and photographic distortion can all create misleading appearances. Proper attribution should be based on recognized diagnostics and, when necessary, professional examination. When examining the obverse for potential doubling, Pay particular attention to the major lettering and date. Use a strong magnifying glass or digital microscope, but do not damage the coin while examining it. If you notice unusual separation or secondary images, photograph the area clearly and compare it with trusted references before making a valuation claim. Another important factor is strike quality. A coin can be unworn but still have areas of weak detail because of the way the dies struck the plancher. This is important when evaluating late wheat cents. A weakly defined feature is not automatically evidence of circulation. Professional graders consider the overall characteristics of the issue when assigning grades. Now let's talk about surface preservation. This is one of the biggest factors separating an ordinary penny from a premium collectible. Look for scratches, carbon spots, stains, corrosion, dents, and evidence of cleaning. A coin with original surfaces and minimal distractions is generally more desirable than a coin that has been heavily scratched or polished. Never clean a potentially valuable wheat penny. This advice is worth repeating because many people think cleaning an old coin will make it more valuable. In reality, harsh cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and make the coin less desirable to collectors. Copper is particularly sensitive to chemicals and environmental changes. So before you spend or sell your 1958 Lincoln wheat penny, look carefully. Confirm that it has no mint mark. Examine the date. Inspect Lincoln's portrait. Study the wheat reverse. Check for unusual doubling. Look for scratches, corrosion, cleaning, and other surface problems. Think carefully about the color and preservation. And most importantly, compare your coin with reliable market information rather than assuming that an online asking price represents its true value. Next coin number 3. This 1944 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, described as being in very fine condition with a claimed market value of $175, zeroth. But there is an important distinction for collectors. A $175 figure should not be treated as a guaranteed value for every 1,944 Philadelphia penny. Current numismatic references show that ordinary circulated 1,944 Philadelphia cents are generally worth much less, while exceptional grades, varieties, and unusual error coins can be worth substantially more. The first thing to understand about this coin is the meaning of without mint mark. The 1944 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Unlike Denver and San Francisco issues, Philadelphia cents from this period did not normally carry a mint letter. So when you look beneath the date on a normal 1944 Philadelphia cent and see no D or S, that is not automatically an error. It is the expected characteristic of the Philadelphia issue. The 1944 Lincoln wheat penny is especially important historically because it came immediately after the famous 1943 steel cent experiment. During World War II, copper was an important strategic material, and the United States Mint temporarily changed the composition of the 1-cent coin. In 1943 cents were struck on zinc-coated steel planchers. These coins looked silver-colored rather than the familiar reddish-brown copper of earlier cents. The experiment created its own problems, including confusion with other denominations and susceptibility to corrosion. In 1944, the traditional bronze composition returned. PCGS explains that production of the new 95% copper alloy began on New Year's Day of 1944 after authorization to return to the traditional composition. This makes the 1944 penny a fascinating transitional coin in the story of American coinage. It came from a period when the country was still deeply involved in World War II, yet the mint was returning to the familiar Lincoln wheat cent composition. That historical background makes every 1944 wheat penny interesting, even when the coin itself is not particularly rare. Imagine the world when this penny was struck. World War II was still underway. American factories were producing military equipment at an extraordinary rate. Millions of American service members were serving around the world. At home, families were living through rationing and wartime restrictions. Somewhere during that enormous national effort, the Philadelphia Mint was striking Lincoln cents that would eventually become collectibles more than 80 years later. A very fine coin should not look like a freshly minted coin. It should show evidence that it was actually used in commerce. But it should also retain significantly more detail than a heavily worn good or fine example. This difference is extremely important when estimating a coin's value. Look closely at Lincoln's hair. The higher areas of the hair receive wear first. Then inspect the cheek and jaw. The ear is another useful area to examine. If the features are strongly defined but show moderate wear, the coin may fit comfortably into the very fine range. If most of the fine detail has disappeared, the coin may grade lower. One of the most exciting possibilities with the 1944 Lincoln cent is an unusual composition or mint error. PCGS specifically identifies 1944 steel cents as a major variety alongside the normal brown, and red bronze issues. This is one of the reasons 1944 is such an interesting year for collectors. The 1944 cent also has a fascinating connection to the story of wartime copper and brass. For decades, collectors heard the popular story that 1944 cents were made entirely from recycled shell casings collected from military use. Modern numismatic research has challenged the idea that the entire enormous production of 1944 cents could have come exclusively from shell casings. PCGS notes that reclaimed shell material was incorporated into the alloy, but that it was not the sole source of the metal used for the enormous mintage. This makes the 1944 penny even more interesting because its history connects directly with the material demands of World War II. Now let's talk about surface quality, because this can make an enormous difference in collector appeal. Carefully inspect your penny under good lighting. Look for scratches, gouges, dents, corrosion, spots, and evidence of cleaning. A naturally aged copper cent can have brown, reddish-brown, or mixed coloration. That is normal. Another factor worth checking is strike quality. Sometimes a coin may have weak detail because of the way it was struck rather than because it experienced circulation. This can be difficult for beginners to distinguish from wear. When evaluating a coin seriously, compare the high points across the design and look for consistent evidence of circulation. The historical significance of the 1944 cent is also something that should not be overlooked. This was not simply another year in the Lincoln cent series. It was a year when the United States was fighting a global war, and the mint was balancing the country's enormous demand for coinage with the strategic importance of metals. The return to copper was part of that story. The 1944 cent brought Americans back to the familiar bronze Lincoln cent after the unusual steel issue of 1943. In that sense, the coin represents both continuity and change. Imagine receiving one of these pennies in 1944. To the person spending it, it was simply 1 cent. They may have used it to buy something from a local store without giving the coin a second thought. Today, however, collectors examine the same design under magnification and study its history, composition, varieties, and condition. That is one of the reasons coin collecting remains so popular. Coins connect everyday life with history. If you have a 1944 wheat penny without a mint mark, start by confirming that the coin is indeed Philadelphia. Next, examine the condition. Then check the surfaces. After that, inspect the date and lettering for unusual characteristics. Finally, determine whether the coin has anything that could justify a premium value. The 1944 Lincoln wheat penny may have a face value of only 1 cent, but its historical story is worth far more. From the return to copper during World War II to the rare off-metal errors and exceptional high-grade examples, this little coin gives collectors an extraordinary opportunity to hold a piece of American history in their hands. Thanks for watching this video. Like this video, subscribe the channel, so check your collection carefully, protect your old coins, never clean a potentially valuable specimen, and always verify a claimed price with reliable market evidence before buying or selling.